Professor Ben Levi, your dissertation was excellent, but as a professor of African studies, are you relevant? Are you really relevant? And I say that with all due respect, are you relevant, and what you teach relevant in this so-called post-racial Barack Obama era?
Well, the question of post-racialism, I have to acknowledge that I don't know what that means. Because when we speak about post-racial, we haven't even resolved what pre-racial was. Next, I would make this argument. Since there's a lot of talk about racialism and the different isms and the different ists. Now, if we take the argument of the anthropologists who would argue that there is no such thing as race, then there could be no such thing as racism, and there can't be a such thing as a racist, and therefore they can't be a post-race or a pre-race. However, what we really are talking about here, in my judgment, is a question of power relationships. If we take the definition of power defined by Dr. Wade Nobles, when Dr. Wade Nobles says that power is the ability to define reality and have someone else accept that definition of reality as if it were their own, then when we get into these questions about post-racial and stuff like that, we will have a post-racial society when we have complete leveling of the playing field, when there's complete equality among everybody. And that is not possible in Western society, because Western society, by its very definition, is unequal. And you can understand this if you go all the way back to the early history and writings of the early Greeks. When you go back and look at Aristotle's position on slavery, and how Aristotle's position on slavery was such that slavery was something that was all right. So if you're going to have slavery, if you're going to have a certain level of unequals, if you're going to have a certain group of people who are the civilized people and everybody else is the barbarians, by definition, you don't have equality. So from the most ancient times, we have never had an idea of a racial or post-racial society. Even when you look at antiquity, we see that people were divided up along the civilized and the barbarians. The barbarians could not acquire equality because, especially when you look at ancient Rome, in their imperialistic moves, they could decide who could be a citizen and who could not be a citizen, regardless of your of what particular nation or clan that you belong to. Well, in this society, we have a very similar thing. If you look at Article 1, Section 2 of the United States Constitution, which is called the Commerce Clause, which regulates commerce and 3/5 of all others. Well, we still have that particular statement existing in the Constitution of the United States of America, which certainly suggests that, number one, the Native Americans can't necessarily get no recognition, even though gradually are and they're doing well with their casinos. But African Americans being 3/5 of all others, and what that essentially means is that planters who owned a whole lot of slaves could count each of their slaves as 3/5 of a person to give them more voting power in Congress. And so that act is still there. Plus, if we look at the fact that justice, as it is known in this society, is unequal, then we still have a problem with that. If it takes $37,000 to keep a young man in jail for a year, and it takes $8,000 to send him off to college, and yet we would rather spend $37,000, almost 2 or 3 times as much, to put them in jail rather than put them in college. Well, my question is, what's wrong with that picture? What is wrong with that picture to be able to do that? And on top of that, we're looking at the fact that justice, if you look at the statue of justice, justice is blind. Now, if justice is blind, that means she can't see any evidence. And the scales are unbalanced, so by definition, there cannot be equality within justice. And if you don't have equality within the law, you can't have equality within the society. So granted, right now, we have an African-American who's a president, even though people are saying, well, he ain't an African-American, he's a this, we don't know what he is. My question to anybody who says that is, if you don't think you know who you are, look in the mirror and ask yourself who talks back at you. Now, if you think you something else, then you go to those particular people who you think you are and ask them if you are one of them. And they will tell you what they think about that. Now, you marinate on that for a minute. And so when we talk about the whole question of a post-racial society is some type of, some type of anomaly. It ain't even real. But that's, again, a whole idea of developing a kind of a ideological idea to this kind of ideology that suggests that if we can convince enough people to believe that it walks like a duck, it talks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, therefore it must be a duck, everybody gonna go around here thinking they ducks. But the truth of the matter is that'll never happen.